I'm Nil Zacharias, the founder of Eat for the Planet. Thank you for tuning in to this discussion about climate change and the American diet. We have a really good group over here for this discussion. We have Jillian Simon from the Earth Day Network, Udi Lazimi from Just Foods, Haley Thomas, founder and CEO of the Happy Org, and Dotsie Bausch, Olympic medalist, founder and executive director of Switch for Good. So we're here to talk about food. We all love food, but unfortunately, most of the food that we eat doesn't love us or the planet back. Food production is one of the leading drivers of greenhouse gas emissions. It's also one of the leading drivers for the degradation of our natural resources, from fresh water and our soil to the rainforest as well as the oceans. And if you look at the American diet, the standard American diet comprises largely of meat, dairy, and eggs. And in America, unfortunately, 99% of meat, dairy, and eggs comes from industrial farms. And industrial animal agriculture is at the heart of our global food system that is incredibly destructive. So industrial animal agriculture contributes more greenhouse gas emissions than all of transportation combined. It uses up a majority of our freshwater resources, occupies more than half of the world's arable land, contributes to air and water pollution, land degradation, deforestation, and is driving millions of species to the brink of extinction. So if that wasn't bad enough, the problem is that animal agriculture doesn't even do a really good job of feeding the world. Nearly 1 billion people go to bed hungry every night. So then the question becomes, we have 7.5 billion people on the planet today. We're going to be 10 billion by the year 2050. If we rely on this destructive system to feed the world, we're not going to be able to feed the world without destroying our life support systems like our rainforests and our oceans. So what should we eat? I think we do know that fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, legumes, and plant-based foods using those ingredients generally use less resources and generally contribute less greenhouse gas emissions. But the problem is most Americans don't make this connection. And even those amongst us, including well-meaning environmentalists who understand that connection, don't generally understand what kind of a positive impact they can make by merely shifting some of their diet towards plants. And those that do get it then seem to think and have several misconceptions around plant-based foods. So we are here today to address all of that. So recently, the Earth Day Network and Yale Program for Climate Change Communications put out this interesting report analyzing the American attitudes towards climate change and diet, as well as consumer attitudes towards plant-based foods. Jillian, I want to start with you. What were some of the key takeaways from that report?
Thank you, Neil. And I just want to say thank you to everyone else being on the panel today. It's really exciting as we celebrate Earth Day Network's 50th anniversary. And it's really important to have this conversation around climate change and the American diet. So the report itself and the research itself is pretty interesting. So as we know, the American diet is predominantly meat-based. The research showed that 71% of people said they eat beef at least once a week. That's not a surprise to any of us. However, we are at a point where we're seeing a profound shift in the American diet. And there are many different factors around that, health being one of them, environment, cost, and technology. So what we're talking about today is about the American, our food choices, our eating habits. What is the willingness we have amongst ourselves to make dietary changes? What are the motivations and barriers to purchasing these foods? And lastly, but not finally, we're going to talk about the link between our food and climate. So a couple of the takeaways in the report talk about while most of us don't identify as being a vegetarian or vegan, there's a willingness among most Americans to want to eat more of a plant-based diet and reduce their meat consumption. Over half of the people surveyed said they are willing to eat more plant-based alternatives or at least try them. While 46% of people said they were willing to use dairy milk alternatives like rice, oat, soy, and almond. However, only 10% of people have said they are currently eating plant-based alternatives. What I found to be extremely interesting was that half of Americans think that a meal with a plant-based main course is more expensive than a meal with a meat-based main course. That is false. It's a key misperception that I hope we can address today. 63% of people said they would eat more plant-based meals if they were cheaper. Also, we need the power of understanding. I think it's about putting the right information out there to folks. A quarter of people surveyed said they are already willing to eat lab-grown meat rather than meat from animals, which is pretty incredible. So the health and environment key motivators that we researched, 91% of people said health is the primary motivator to eat more plant-based meals. 64% of people are motivated by doing something for the environment. While most people don't know what that something is, they know they want to reduce their carbon footprint and want to know more. And then we have barriers that we'll talk about: cost, taste, and convenience. We need to keep in mind that food is not equitably available or affordable to all Americans. Lower income Americans lack access to grocery stores and fresh produce. So we always have to make sure we have those discussions whenever we talk about climate change and our diets. And lastly, the link between climate and food. 27% of Americans believe that beef contributes a lot to global warming, and 40% think that it doesn't contribute at all, or they just don't know. Again, it's just putting the information out there. When we worked on this with Yale and Dr. Lizerowitz and his team, they said to me, there's a huge gap between reality in our food system and what we think as Americans. So with that said, I'd love to talk more with the panel about this research.
Yeah, Jillian, I think one of the key things from that research that I took away is that there's such a huge opportunity here to educate people about the connection between food and climate change. And one of the things that stood out for me in that report was that Americans are willing to eat plant-based foods, but say that most people have either not told them that they should or explained to them why. So Dotsie, why don't you help us with that question? Like, should people be eating plant-based foods, and if so, why?
Wow, well, I would be honored to be the first one then to ask them to consider it, for sure. And then, maybe briefly explain why they should. Leaning into more plants and less animals is honestly the single most impactful step that you can take as an individual to fight climate change. And that's pretty amazing. It's been shown that ditching animal foods and going plant-based can reduce your personal carbon emissions on average by 45% and land use by 55%. Well, that's a pretty seismic shift in what you can personally do for Mother Earth. And to me, I just, going plant-based, it just was so empowering and still is every single day when I wake up and make a decision with what's on my plate about how much good I can do for the planet. And I know that the general thinking is that going plant-based is going to be hard and difficult. But honestly, I wouldn't lie to you, it is really easy. I grew up in the South, and I grew up eating meat, really much raised on barbecue and brisket and ribs. And there probably wasn't a time for 35 years of my life that there wasn't an animal on my plate. So honestly, if I can do it, you guys can do it. And I find plant-based eating just wildly delicious. And I feel like right now in this period of time that we're in, while we're practicing sheltering in place, it's the perfect time to give it a try. If this panel inspires you to do so, we're all cooking at home right now, and every night we kind of have that that time too to experiment and uncover all of the joys of cooking with plants.
Thank you, Dotsie. Great way to kick things off. I mean, really, it comes down to getting people to get outside the comfort zone and try something that seems daunting at first, but if you really give it a shot, it can be an entry into a whole new way of eating. So, you know, one of the things, again, from that report specifically, but that we do know in general is that personal health and nutrition tend to be the key motivating factors that drive people to choose plant-based foods. We've known that for a while, besides cost, of course, and taste, but if personal health is what's driving people, and we know, given the state of the world right now, it's an even bigger factor in buying decisions. Haley, why don't you help us with trying to get us to understand what the benefits of plant-based foods are? Why should people even make the leap, or at least give it a chance, especially in these trying times?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a reason why, like, every mom on the planet has said, like, you need to eat your vegetables, or that it's important to eat a rainbow. And it's because plant-based foods are incredibly rich in phytochemicals and antioxidants that boost immunity and reduce inflammation, full of fiber that helps lower cholesterol and, of course, alleviate bowel issues and things like that. And so when we are engaging with plant foods and incorporating them into our diets, we're able to activate a really special part of health and wellness. We are able to dive into mindfulness that helps us to tune into the ways that our bodies feel and to adjust to that. And so I think that through plant-based eating, we really have an opportunity as individuals to just not only get to know food and where it comes from, how it grows, how it impacts us, but also to really reap those benefits and feel those energy boosts and to see symptoms alleviate. And so through that, it's really exciting. But of course, you know, with any lifestyle change and diet change, it's important to be mindful. And so just like how you can have all the sugary, you know, carby foods in any other diet, that's also a potential with plant-based foods. So if we're paying attention to what we're putting into our bodies and ensuring that we're truly going from a standpoint of not only flavor, but also the ways that it fuels us and how we feel, then there's a level of empowerment that we really tap into there. And similar to you, Dotsie, I grew up eating every possible animal food, and I was a total, like, dairy obsessed person, but you know, I didn't need to let go of my culture or heritage, being, you know, having Jamaican parents. Like, none of that was lost through this transformation. So it's really cool to be able to tap into creativity of cooking and utilize all of the things that I love and just transform them through plant-based cooking techniques.
Thanks, Haley. Jillian, right in the beginning, you did mention something about in terms of barriers, right? Cost seems to be this barrier, whether it's true or perceived to be true, that is restricting some people from giving plant-based foods a choice. And then, of course, when we say plant-based foods, there's a wide spectrum of foods we're talking about. There's the produce aisle, and now there's even the meat section where you can get plant-based meat in, right? So, Udi, you work for a food company. Can you tell us whether this cost barrier, is it real? Is it a perception? Can you help separate the fact from fiction here? And plus, the secondary question I have for you is that if you're a manufacturer of plant-based foods, how do you compete with meat, dairy, and eggs that is kept artificially priced low because of subsidies? I know that's a really big question, but let's address the cost issue and see how we can get better on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Eat Just, our mayos, dressings, and now excitingly our Just Egg, which is a totally plant-based egg product that you can actually find in all the retail grocery stores, and, you know, when restaurants open back up, you can find them there too. Our company has from the beginning, since we started a few years ago, really led with the philosophy that if products don't A, taste phenomenal, and B, aren't accessible, we're not going to change the world. And that's really our mission. And I believe, you know, talking to many other leaders in the food space and the food industry, that's also their mission. And based on what we already heard today, plant-based foods, you know, opportunities to buy plant-based, the different alternatives that are in the marketplace right now are really an incredible opportunity for people to make a difference. But one of the things that I think is challenging is that people believe, as was said, that it is more expensive. And so we're really trying to break that perception, that misperception, really. So, we've been working really hard to bring down the price of our products to make it available to millions more. We're going to keep working to bring that cost down, more points of distribution, retail, food service. The more that the interest grows, the more that the industry as a whole can bring the price down. But it actually hasn't been an impediment to market growth. Contrary to that belief that Jillian brought up from the study, it's actually incredible to see the success of plant-based foods in the market. And I think it's largely due to the fact that now technology and culinary artistry has come together to make products taste incredibly good. And, most people can't tell the difference with our product, that it's between a plant-based egg and an egg that comes from a chicken. And yet by purchasing our products, people are saving 98% less water, 94%, 95% less CO2 emissions. And it's just staggering, the impact, and zero cholesterol, et cetera. But, consumers, I think, are really behind it in a lot of ways. And it's just a matter of kind of this wave that's growing, and people are jumping on board. Recently, we've seen that sales have just been phenomenal in many ways, and not just at Whole Foods and kind of the natural food stores, but at Walmart. And we've had 86% growth since last quarter in 2019 to this quarter. At Kroger, nearly 50%. We're in all Krogers, all Walmarts, Safeways here in Northern California. And we just launched in Whole Foods a Just Egg Folded, which is like a patty that you just throw in a toaster and throw it on your sandwiches or burritos or however you want to eat it really, really quickly. So making things accessible is a key to the success of this industry. And there's costs to manufacturing, there's costs to the raw feedstock. And just to mention, I manage a network of farmers around the world that we source from, specifically things like mung beans, which are the protein that allows us to make Just Egg. And the key is to incentivize farmers to be able to grow these products, to work with the government, to work on policy that can incentivize growers to be able to produce these crops, because it is very difficult to compete with soy and corn, which completely dominate the landscape in the US and around the world. So the more that consumers are able to see that these products taste incredible and are competing and don't have to really tax your wallet, the more demand, the more we'll be able to produce more of these crops and compete with these, highly subsidized, and even create new subsidies and new support systems through USDA and others that can support emerging plant proteins for people that want to choose to eat more healthfully and better for the earth.
Yeah, Udi, I think you're so right that the odds seem to be stacked against plant-based foods if you look at the way agricultural policy works. But at the same time, plant-based foods keep growing year over year and defying all the odds, which tells you that there's consumer demand for it. And finally, now you have companies such as yours that are rising up to that challenge and developing really good tasting, accessible products that mimic foods that they're used to, that Americans love, right? Like meat, dairy, and eggs. But one of the other barriers that I want to bring up is this issue around health and nutrition. A lot of Americans still seem to think that you can't really get most of your nutrients by using substitutes or eating plants. And Dotsie, you're a great example of a human being who has thrived eating plants, obviously. But yet, if you look at the media and you look at some of the health experts, even, there's mixed messages being sent to consumers around what's good for you from a nutrition standpoint. Let's just take dairy as an example. It's an entire food group that most people in America and across the world actually are better off excluding from their diets. Yet, if you ask most people on the street, I would say 9 out of 10 people would think you need dairy in your diet. So I'm giving dairy just as an example, but what is your take on plants and whether they lack nutrients, and can they make up for the meat, dairy, and eggs that we're so used to.
Yeah, well, Nil, you hit the nail on the head when you said media, because media gets their information, obviously from a variety of sources, but most notably is big industry, right? And big industry feeds us only the information that they want us to hear so that we buy their product, whatever the industry might be. So inherently, that information is going to be slightly skewed. And I personally think as human beings, we need to start thinking a little more critically for our health and the health of our families, and we need to be asking more questions. Because we have been fed a completely false narrative our whole lives, myself included, and that's that we need animal foods to grow big and strong. When the truth is, we need nutrients to grow big and strong. And the package that those nutrients come in does not have to be from animals. In fact, it can cause great harm. You brought up dairy, so let's just take dairy for example. We've all heard that milk does a body good. But the reality is, when you look at the science and the research, cow's milk causes a plethora of complications in the human body, from severe intolerances to lactose, to allergies. It's a conduit to asthma and a host of breathing problems. It's also host to developing hormonal-based cancers, and it's very inflammatory for the human body. And for planet Earth, which is what we're here today to celebrate, according to the US Geological Survey, the shower heads that are water-saving shower heads, right? So the ones that are efficient, they produce about 2 gallons of water per minute. Now, knowing that it takes 1,000 gallons of water to produce just 1 gallon of milk, a person can save, each individual, every single person watching this call, watching this panel, can save the equivalent to 50 10-minute showers for every gallon of milk that they don't drink. That's a heck of a lot in bedded water that we can save together.
Yeah, I think it's, there's the connections with nutrition as well as the impact on our natural resources are just so simple. And for those people, if you want a simple way of understanding it, the reason plants are so powerful is because we're essentially taking out the inefficient middlemen in our food system, which are the animals, and providing those crop calories directly to humans. And so even if you shift a small percentage of your diet towards consuming calories from the source, which are plants, you are automatically taking a big step in the right direction when it comes to preserving our natural resources and slowing down the pace of climate change. Besides nutrition, of course, and I love the way you addressed that, Dotsie, one of the bigger barriers that we did bring up earlier is taste. People have this perception that plant-based foods are bland. They don't stack up to our comfort food favorites. And, some people even seem to think that if you eat plants, you're basically eating salad all the time. Haley, we know most of that is not true. You've been eating this way for years and enjoying delicious food. Tell us why the taste barrier is a complete misconception.
Oh, for sure. I definitely get my fair share of like, oh, you eat grass comments, and it's like, it doesn't even make sense to a certain extent. But I think that it's really important to think about our food culture in general, what we've been exposed to in our lives and what's now available to us. There is so much collaboration between cuisines, there's fusion, and there's our individual cultures that we can really apply all of the flavors and spices and things we love to plant-based foods. And a big issue here is just not knowing how to prepare these things. I mean, working with kids through my nonprofit, children are traumatized by soggy broccoli and spinach that's just sitting there in like this weird coagulation. And so it's really important for us to apply that same creativity and vibrancy to plant-based foods. And they're incredibly versatile and truly can create such a blank canvas for creativity and just mixing anything up. And so for us, if we're able to convince kids that not only are plants, incredibly good for them, but that they can also be really delicious and be transformed into amazing things, then anyone can truly do this. And I think a huge part of this, even beyond flavor and understanding that it's, better to roast your sweet potatoes and boil them, is really paying attention to the communal nature of food in general. According to the report, about 50% of Americans would be more willing to engage in plant-based foods and try them if their friends and family were doing so. And so I think that shows a huge power that we have as individuals to bring others into our food journeys and to really share what's on our tables. And while we can't do that now, I think that it's really amazing seeing people like doing live Zoom cooking classes or baking, and we can try all of these recipes and experiment with these things together at home. And so I think starting there is a great step, but when we're all finally able to be out there, it's so important for us to try new things, visit all of the amazing vegan restaurants, try new plant-based products like the Just Egg. I mean, we've been experimenting with that in my house, like during this entire quarantine. And so it's just fun to bring a vibrant energy towards it. I know that we are all trying to do purposeful work here and to make an impact, but it's important to also enjoy that journey and to infuse joy into whatever lifestyle that you adopt, and that definitely contributes to the experience. So if we can have fun with it and just get creative and try to find ways to plant-baseify our favorite foods, then I think we can really do amazing things and get on board.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you also mentioned, you brought up the fact that most of us are, I mean, all of us are, to be honest, stuck at home right now. And it's, if anything, it's helped us understand better how important a resilient food system is and how important food and sharing food with people that you love is a crucial part of our cultural experience, right? So, and when you're eating plants, it's the same foods, you're just substituting the core ingredients. You don't have to compromise on taste. We had some minor technical difficulties. So if you see the squares rearranged, it's because we had to restart after the last question. So Udi, I know from your perspective, you guys are working on really cutting edge, important products that are mimicking the taste and texture of animal-based foods. But one of the criticisms that usually gets lobbied towards plant-based products that meet the taste test is that they've gone too far down the line of mimicking an animal food and now are too processed. So how do you balance the need to keep things tasting good, because people want to eat good tasting food, but also balance the needs of nutrition and health, which we know are one of the driving factors for people choosing plant-based foods to begin with?
Yeah, those are great questions. Thanks, Nell. At Eat Just, we totally lead with taste. Taste is so critical to what we do, making food accessible to people that tastes delicious. That's been developed by our in-house team of Michelin star chefs that have made a Just Egg product that tastes and looks just like eggs, like you said. I think there's a misperception that meat products and dairy products are somehow not processed, generally speaking. In fact, that's not true for the most part. Most of the meat that you would find in the grocery store and restaurants has been heavily processed. And that's not really spoken about. Yes, our products are manufactured. They're a combination of different ingredients, of plant proteins and different oils and water. But for the most part, you know, that's in many ways the nature of how our society brings food to the world. And we're working as hard as we can to simplify, clean our labels, to create the healthiest, most sustainable products possible. And we're on V1 and V2 right now of our Just Egg liquid product, which scrambles like an egg in a pan when you pour it in, or a folded product, which you throw in the toaster or bake. But V3, V4, V5, those are the versions that are going to be increasingly more nutritious when we add new, different plant proteins and different vitamins and minerals to improve the nutrition. And at the same time, finding ways to reduce the impact of processing, reduce kind of all the different things that people might not want, which right now we haven't heard negative feedback, but we're always striving to make it better. In fact, I'll just close with saying that our goal is not to mimic an egg. It's to make a product that tastes incredible, that people will want to choose, just like they originally chose eggs. They'll see it as something that looks and tastes like something they're familiar with, but has even more potential nutrition benefits. and you know, the sky's the limit in the plant-based foods space, I believe.
We've had some really interesting insights here. Jillian, I want you to kind of help us translate some of these insights into something actionable that we can offer to people, so everyone can take away something from this that they can really look at as the solution to some of the problems we're facing with the climate crisis right now.
Sure. Well, one thing I will say, the most immediate action that we can all take right now for the betterment of self and planet is to adopt a plant-based diet. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the world. And one of the biggest contributors to that is red meat. We have to take a closer look as to, you know, from red meat and heart disease to our greenhouse gas emissions. And what is there a common denominator? What's the force behind it? And it comes down to animal agriculture. It comes down to what we're putting in our body, meat and dairy. So, you know, our call to action is try to adopt a plant-based diet. And if you can't do it all at once, which I know is hard for a lot of people, commit to going plant-based once a week. Give up meat and dairy and eggs once a week. If you're already doing that, great. Try to do that once a day. And you'll start noticing how much better you feel. I also encourage people to watch Game Changers, which Jotzi was featured in. And you'll see the athletes really talk about their performance levels, the health benefits, and we could obviously see, especially now, what is happening in the world, what animal agriculture, what toll it really does on the environment, from pollutants to animal suffrage. So I would say our call to action is really to encourage people to take a closer look at adopting a plant-based diet.
Thank you, Jillian. And I just want to kind of close with this thought that a lot of people, when they think about climate change or they think of the state of the world right now, it leads to a lot of fear and dread and uncertainty about the future. And I think it's important, for people to walk away from this conversation to understand that climate change is something we should be concerned about, but instead of the narrative of fear and dread, how about we look at it as an opportunity for us to change, to create a better world, right? To create a world where food is just, equitable, accessible for all, where the food we eat actually restores our health as well as the health of our failing ecosystems. And imagine, what if we created this new world where human beings thrive on this planet in balance with nature rather than at odds with nature? And I think most people might think, they don't run the government, they don't run a food company, they don't run a nonprofit, maybe they don't have the power. But to your point, Jillian, and to everyone's point on this panel, each of us as individuals have the power 3 or more times a day when we sit down to eat. Choose plants, use your power. I'd like to just close with that. Thank you everyone for joining the panel today and for your really amazing insights.